Hey guys, on this video I will be returning to the X-Files, and this is my review of the 7th episode of the first season. It is called Ghost in the Machine. It's an episode I was dreading revisiting, and as it turns out I had every reason to dread it because this is an absolute stinker. Every so often you get one on this show, and this absolutely stinks, this episode. I think it's fair to say this is one of the worst episodes of the whole show, and the sort of episode which they mostly cut out later on in later seasons. Not completely, but just one of those episodes which is almost a product of its time and just stands out as being very early 90s and doesn't really age that well. I'm sure it wasn't grabbing the imagination at the time neither, but I think especially watching it now, it's very dated. And the whole premise of the thing just doesn't work. I guess it's a premise which could have worked in the context of this sort of science fiction type show, but it's just played out in this very kind of plodding and cheesy type way. It's all very on the nose, and yeah, they just don't think this one through, really. It's a really awful episode. Now, what's funny is it's followed up by what may be one of the best episodes of the show ever. Certainly a standout in season 1, and that is Ice. So that's the next episode for me to review. So you can look forward to that next time. But yes, Ghost in the Machine, really not very good. So the premise is that it involves computers, and we have this computer whiz Brad who has come up with this really advanced automated voice recognition computer. So this is diving into the virtual, well, not virtual reality, but more the kind of what's the term I'm looking for here, the artificial intelligence realm. That's it, which obviously at this point was very much in its infancy, or the idea of it was in its infancy. And what we get at the start of the episode is that Brad is told then his operating system is to be dropped. They're no longer going to use it. So he works for this high-tech company, and yeah, the CEO or the boss or whoever tells him, we're not using it anymore, we've got to move with the times. That in itself I thought was a bit weird, because I'm guessing in 1993 that sort of operating system would have been with the times, but I don't know if there'd been some resistance or if it hadn't quite worked out as they would have hoped. But it's dropped, and you can see that Brad's taking it rough, and he's really kind of pissed off. And the next thing we know, someone is killed thanks to the machine, thanks to an operating error, and we see that the machine appears to be starting like a fan in the main building, and I think it's the CEO who's killed. He's just blown into this thing, and we see the machine, the computer has actually started it off. So a murder investigation ensues, and it becomes this whole mystery of someone's, well, if it's not the artificial intelligence, then someone has hacked into the machine to control it, which is obviously going to be their first thought. an old friend of Mulder's, like this preppy sort of agent who they trained together on in the academy. He comes to Mulder and Scully with the case, and he says he very much needs this case. Jerry, his name is. I think I've seen the actor in other stuff, but his whole thing is that he needs this case badly because, as Mulder later explains to Scully, he once had a bad experience years ago when he put himself out on the line for a certain case. Things went south and it kind of stalled his career for a while. So the whole tone of it is that he needs to win this case to really get some brownie points, and that's why he's gone to Mulder and to Scully for their expertise. But initially, of course, no surprise, the interest falls on to Brad himself. He is the key suspect. But you have this sort of mystery to do with who's hacked these things and their motivations. And it's a completely dumb episode from the start, really, because when you see like the voice recognition service, I mean, it looks like Kit out of Knight Rider. It sort of lights up in that certain way. It's got that sort of dashboard, but it is so cheesy because it's almost like it's like the way it flashes and stuff and the way it operates is like it's representing like a human face, and the voice just makes it worse. It's got, this very kind of emotive sort of human voice, but it's very, I guess it's a cross between machine-like and being human, but it's just very sort of goofy, the voice and the way it talks and some of the things it said. They just push it too far in it trying to sound sort of human and emotional, because it's like, it's just asking questions of it. Kind of stuff like what are you doing, Brad, and by kind of at the end when it's like destroyed, and just these really silly sort of deliveries and lines, and the fact that it's talking throughout scenes with Brad and with other people just telegraphs the whole sort of thing. Because I think it's interesting thinking of this sort of storyline around this time, because another thing that stands out is, of course, a bit later than this, I, Robot You, Jane, an episode in the first season of Buffy, funnily enough, and that's trying to deal with a similar thing, except obviously it's looking at like social media and online relationships and stuff. But that is notoriously a bad episode of Buffy, which I think gets away with it a bit more than this does, partly because this is just dull, this is just boring, that's the problem. I think that episode of Buffy is probably better and gets away with it more just because they at least turn it into like this over-the-top, like monster type plot of an episode where you can at least have some cheesy fun with it. With this, it's kind of cheesy but in a bad way, and it just feels flat. There's no real atmosphere, no mood, there's no suspense to it at all. I think Brad is kind of this stereotypical like Zen type figure. The actor's fine, I don't really have a problem with the actor, but the character itself I just couldn't care about. He's like unlikable, he's kind of whiny. He kind of presents this argument that that it's just it's almost the lesser of two evils he's going for with the technology then, and because at one point he acknowledges, because he's arguing with Mulder over the sort of pros and cons, and Mulder brings up the analogy of the atomic bomb, or sorry, Brad does actually, and his sort of argument is that yes, I created sort of a monster and a dangerous weapon in this thing, but it's better in my hands than it is like in government hand and stuff, and it at least can serve some sort of purpose in my hands. But yeah, he's kind of unlikable, Brad, and just not very interesting. It sort of feels a bit like a grab bag of characteristics. I think you also get some of the kind of dumb techno speak, which you did get in Buffy in that episode with Jenny and stuff, but for some reason it just worked better in that episode, I think. But in this, yeah, you get just over the top lines and descriptions like techno wizard, yeah, data hacker, and just various just silly sort of lines of dialogue, which just all fall flat. Um, when Brad's trying to, because when they first interview him, and he's obviously saying it's not me, basically, it wasn't me, and he's trying to give them logic why he didn't do it, but he just says to Mulder at one point, or he says to Scully, sorry, he says, it's a puzzle, Mrs. Scully, for the scrappy mind. My mind's not, well, it's scruffy. My mind's not scruffy. And that's basically his argument. He's saying someone who would commit this crime has a scruffy mind, and I don't have a scruff, so it's all gibberish. There's a lot of gibberish in this episode. I didn't really care about Jerry, like the Academy friend of Mulder's. He's a little bit bland as well. Again, I think the actor's fine. He does a solid job. But the whole twist with that character is that he basically sets Mulder up for a fall, because Mulder presents to him his theory, which is that this is something to do with artificial intelligence, and Jerry kind of dismisses that, but takes it on board, and then he basically uses it the next day in the meeting, and he steals Mulder's files and paints it as, yeah, this was my profile, I came up with this, and obviously tries to justify it later as you just did the basics, Mulder, I kind of filled in the blanks. And again, I really needed this case. This is important. And it's just a little bit predictable then as soon as you see Jerry show up on screen. And I think just the way he's acting a bit, then he's going to end up being a bit of a jerk. You wouldn't necessarily guess this per se, but I think you would guess then a bit like Scully's like Academy, a friend in that other episode. I think the way he turned out to be kind of full of himself or a bit of a jerk. Although he is from the start, to be fair, the way he's talking, but kind of predictable, and it just feels like sort of forced drama, really. Now there's this other guy who's the head of security who gives them like the names on the list who are the ones who would have access and could pull off this sort of job, and it's a short list basically. And I do like his line actually when they say, is your name included on that? and he's like, hey, I've got a pension to protect here. I'm like so many years away from retirement. I do quite like that as an answer. But the twist is later than it is actually him. He's actually working with the government on this to protect this technology, because the whole conspiracy angle is that the government are involved in this and they want access to this technology. And at one point, at a stage where Mulder has convinced Brad to work with him and Scully to gain access to the building and to override the system before it does any more damage, he's convinced Brad to work with them. But before Brad can do this, the government, well, he mysteriously disappeared, but Mulder finds out the government have kidnapped him, and they even wrote Deep Throat into this episode because he gives Mulder some intelligence on what's going on and says, yeah, the government have been experimenting with artificial intelligence for years. But it's kind of annoying because I like Deep Throat as a character, and he was roped into this like crappy episode. But there's this stuff about, because Brad has come across as very anti-government up to this point, and Mulder says, well, he'll never deal with them. And Deep Throat's basically, yeah, well, freedom will do funny things to a man. So they're kind of at this impasse. I don't think you see Brad again in the episode, but he has been taken away, and the government are trying to negotiate with him basically so that they can use the technology. But yeah, the twist is that it is the head of security who has been working from the inside on this and has been involved in harnessing the technology and actually killing people off, using it to kill people off, and people who are standing in its way, of course. And I sort of have a problem with that twist, because just looking at the guy, I just don't see it coming from him. You know, when he has the line about, hey, I'm retiring soon and stuff, and I've got a pension, and that's the way he strikes me, as that very sort of kind of just normal sort of guy, just plugging along in this kind of, mundane type job. And he seems like a solid sort of guy, and I just believe that that's kind of who he is. I don't, I guess that's maybe why they think, well, actually this twist works, because he's convincing as that kind of normal, decent guy. But yeah, I didn't really when they played that twist, I wasn't really that convinced with it. So there you go. And there's just stuff with Brad, certain quirky things that make him into this Zen sort of guy when, he insists they take their shoes off when he comes in his house, stuff like that. But he's a very murky character, just because obviously there's a degree of sympathy. I mean, not for me, but there's meant to be, and he's sort of this in-between character, but at the same time he is living this pretty cozy sort of lifestyle in this fancy, modern house. But yeah, the whole twist is that it's the security guy, and he's kind of working from the inside for the government. And at the end we see, because they obviously destroyed the computer in the end, that being Mulder and Scully, but at the end we see the security guy trying to work on it, trying to get it fixed, because there's like they've only got a matter of hours before they have to abandon it altogether. So they're trying to recreate it, so that's a sort of a cliffhanger, but that's the episode. It doesn't really leave me with much, to be fair. It's really, really bad. And I would be surprised if there's many that would, kind of match this when it comes to how bad it is. I think this is one of the worst episodes of the whole show. And it's at least fitting now I have a really good episode coming up. Or at least I remember it Ice, that being, I remember it being really good. Which definitely has a Thing feel, as in The Thing, the Carpenter film, quite similar to that, the premise. So I'm looking forward to that. But as for Ghost in the Machine, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. Yeah. Easily the weakest episode I've seen so far, and that makes my ranking of it easy because it's going straight to the bottom of the list. Number 7, with a bullet, Ghost in the Machine. Now, I'm sort of guessing that next time Ice will be going to the top of the list, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be the best episode up to this point. But we'll see. I'll be getting to Ice soon. But that's Ghost in the Machine. Let me know your thoughts on this episode in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you are new to the channel. And look out for more X-Files reviews coming soon. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.